Under the muted hum of the press hall in Doha, the announcement came like a sigh of relief carried through static microphones and trembling camera lenses. Khalil al-Hayya, the veteran Hamas negotiator whose words often mark turning points in this enduring war, leaned into the podium and spoke slowly, deliberately, with the gravity of a man aware that every syllable would echo across borders. "We have received assurances from the mediating brothers and the American administration," he said, pausing as the translation rippled through the room, all confirming that the war is completely over. Those 12 words, uttered in Arabic but destined for global headlines, marked what may be the most consequential shift in Gaza's modern history. For nearly 2 years, the conflict between Israel and Hamas has defined the region's every breath, from shattered neighborhoods in Khan Yunis to the corridors of power in Washington. And now, with this declaration, the guns that had thundered across Gaza's skies seem, at least for the moment, to have fallen silent. The confirmation didn't come from Israel's military briefings or from Washington's carefully worded statements. It came from the very group that had fought from the tunnels beneath Gaza, one whose silence or defiance often determined whether ceasefire talks lived or died. Khalil al-Hayya's statement was more than a claim. It was a message of recognition that US mediation, Egyptian persistence, and Qatari diplomacy had converged into something tangible: an end to the war. Behind closed doors, the assurance reportedly came from the highest diplomatic levels, envoys shuttling between Cairo, Doha, and Tel Aviv in a flurry of last-minute guarantees. American negotiators, led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, relayed final confirmations to both Hamas and Israel through Egyptian and Qatari intermediaries. The phrase, "the war is completely over," was not just symbolic. It carried legal and logistical weight. It meant that Israel's military operations, particularly in Rafah, Gaza City, and Jabalia, would halt under international monitoring, and humanitarian convoys could resume unimpeded through the Rafah crossing. In Washington, the tone was cautiously optimistic. A senior White House official, speaking on condition of anonymity, told reporters, "We have reached a phase where both parties understand that the military track has exhausted itself. The Biden administration had once struggled to contain the political cost of its stance on Gaza, but under President Trump's renewed engagement, the equation changed." The Trump peace roadmap, unveiled months earlier, became the scaffolding upon which this ceasefire was built, blending American guarantees, Arab reconstruction commitments, and Israeli security clauses into one sprawling but functional deal. Across Gaza, residents emerged from the rubble-strewn streets with disbelief. For months, the air had been filled with the drone of warplanes and the echo of artillery. Now it was eerily still. Markets reopened, bakeries rekindled their ovens, and families lined up at makeshift water tanks distributed by the Red Crescent. In Khan Yunis, where much of the southern offensive had raged, the graffiti on the walls still read, "Sumud, steadfastness." But today, that word carried a new undertone: survival. For Hamas, this moment was as much political as it was existential. The organization, battered militarily and under mounting pressure from Qatar and Egypt to accept the US brokered deal, saw in this truce a chance to reassert itself as a legitimate political actor rather than a resistance faction. Al-Hayya's language was calculated. He didn't speak of victory nor of surrender. Instead, he invoked a term that resonated with the movement's broader narrative: assurances. The use of that word reflected a deeper truth, that this ceasefire was not built on trust, but on guarantees, enforceable through international mechanisms. In Tel Aviv, Israeli officials offered no formal comment, but leaks from the Prime Minister's office indicated that the War Cabinet had, in private, accepted the framework proposed by the US and Egypt. According to sources cited by Reuters, the Israeli military was already preparing a phased withdrawal from densely populated areas, with the first units expected to pull back from Gaza City within days. A senior IDF officer reportedly said, "The objective was to dismantle Hamas's war infrastructure." That phase is done. The next is stabilization, but even amid relief, skepticism lingers. Israelis who had endured months of rocket fire from Gaza remain wary of a truce that many fear could allow Hamas to regroup. Meanwhile, Palestinians in Gaza question whether the end of the war truly means peace, or just another temporary lull before a new storm? In Cairo, where much of the diplomatic choreography unfolded, Egyptian intelligence chief Abbas Kamel convened a closed-door session with Qatari and American counterparts to finalize the monitoring mechanism. Under the agreed framework, international observers, primarily from the United Nations and Arab League, will oversee the withdrawal process and the reconstruction phase. A $50 billion reconstruction fund, pledged jointly by the United States, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the European Union, is set to be managed through a consortium led by the World Bank, ensuring transparency in disbursement and oversight. The US administration framed this as not merely a ceasefire, but the implementation of Phase 2 of President Trump's Gaza peace plan. That phase includes prisoner exchanges, the reopening of Gaza's seaports under joint international supervision, and the gradual demilitarization of border zones. The plan, controversial at its unveiling, now appears to be finding reluctant acceptance across the spectrum of regional actors. Even Iran, long an adversary of US-led peace initiatives, has toned down its rhetoric, though it continues to urge Palestinian factions to remain vigilant. Al-Hayya's statement, though brief, carried undertones of coordination with these larger diplomatic moves. When he said the mediating brothers and the American administration, it was a deliberate acknowledgement of Qatar's and Egypt's roles alongside Washington's direct involvement. The phrase mediating brothers was significant. It signaled gratitude without subservience, respect without compromise. In Doha, the mood among diplomats was cautiously celebratory. A Qatari official close to the talks told Al Jazeera, "The parties have reached a point where they understand that continuation of war benefits no one." The assurances given were not symbolic. They are binding. This was followed by a televised broadcast where Qatar's foreign minister reaffirmed his country's commitment to ensure compliance, saying, "We will remain engaged to guarantee that this peace holds, not just as mediators, but as guarantors." Meanwhile, in the United Nations headquarters in New York, the Security Council prepared to adopt a resolution formalizing the end of hostilities. The draft, co-sponsored by the US, Egypt, and France, called for an immediate and permanent cessation of all military operations and established a special envoy to oversee post-conflict reconstruction. The human cost of this war remains staggering. Over 67,000 Palestinians have been killed since the escalation began in 2023, according to Gaza's health ministry, with more than 90% of the territory's population displaced. Israel, too, bears deep scars. Over 1,400 Israelis lost their lives in the October 2023 Hamas attack that triggered the war, and hundreds of thousands have lived under prolonged rocket alerts. For both societies, peace is not a declaration, it is a process. In Rafah, a mother named Samira held up her phone to record al-Hayya's announcement. Her home was gone, her husband missing. "I don't know what peace means," she told an AFP reporter nearby, "but if the bombing stops, that's enough for now." Her words, raw and weary, encapsulate what this ceasefire represents for millions, not a triumph, but a reprieve. As night fell over Gaza, the call to prayer mingled with the sound of reconstruction, the hum of generators, the distant rumble of bulldozers clearing debris. For the first time in nearly 2 years, humanitarian agencies reported unobstructed access to northern Gaza. Convoys carrying medical supplies and food entered through the Rafah crossing, escorted by UN vehicles bearing the insignia of multiple nations. On social media, reactions were immediate and polarized. Supporters hailed the announcement as the beginning of a new chapter, while critics accused Hamas of bowing to foreign pressure. Israeli commentators debated whether the deal constituted a victory for diplomacy or a dangerous pause that left underlying tensions unresolved. In Washington, President Trump posted on Truth Social, "Our administration promised a peace that works. Today, we kept that promise." The post went viral within minutes, drawing both praise and outrage. Analysts point out that this truce also redefines America's regional influence. After years of disengagement and fractured alliances, Washington now finds itself at the center of Middle Eastern diplomacy once again. The successful coordination between Qatar, Egypt, and the US underscores a rare moment of unity among traditional rivals, forged under the shared objective of ending a war that had destabilized the region. But challenges lie ahead. The reconstruction of Gaza, estimated to take at least a decade, requires not only funds but political will. International donors are wary of corruption and mismanagement, while Israel insists on security guarantees to prevent the re-emergence of militant networks. Hamas, for its part, faces internal divisions between its political and military wings over how to navigate the post-war phase. Khalil al-Hayya's appearance before the cameras was thus more than a declaration. It was a signal of strategic recalibration. The man who once served as Hamas's deputy in Gaza now speaks not as a commander, but as a diplomat, one entrusted to negotiate survival through words rather than weapons. His message to the world, though brief, encapsulated a profound transformation. The recognition that even for movements built on resistance, peace can be a tool of power. In the following days, joint technical teams are expected to convene in Cairo to outline timelines for Israel's withdrawal, humanitarian monitoring, and prisoner exchanges. Among the key clauses is the release of remaining Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian detainees held in Israeli prisons. The International Committee of the Red Cross has been tasked with verifying these exchanges under the watchful eyes of global media. This new phase also introduces a symbolic milestone: the reactivation of Gaza's civilian administration under Palestinian technocrats, coordinated through the Palestinian Authority, but with Hamas's political consent. For the first time since 2007, Gaza may see a hybrid governance model aimed at restoring public services and infrastructure. At the core of it all, the statement that began this chain of reactions, "We have received assurances that the war is completely over," will be remembered as both an end and a beginning. Whether history will judge it as the dawn of peace or a fragile pause remains uncertain. But for now, Gaza breathes. And as the world watches, those words echo. From the halls of the United Nations to the streets of Rafah, the war is over, the peace must begin.